to new business, review and discussion of Bill 109.
Before we do that, can I make a motion to go into executive session to consult with counsel regarding the board's duties and responsibilities?
You can do so.
So moved.
You need a second.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion approved. Everybody else has to leave.
We gotta vacate anyway. You and me, John. About 2 o'clock this afternoon.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the recommendations provided by counsel during executive session.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion approved. Good. Okay, so, new business, review and discussion of Bill 109. Comments, commissioners? I have some comments, certainly.
I was wondering, I know that the administration commissioned some sort of committee for geothermal. Is that correct, Bobby? Like to sort of fact-finding commission or something like that?
Yeah, Peter Adler facilitated that.
Yeah, that was basically to look at, whether you needed a health study, what you should do, and, yeah.
But nothing similar has been proposed by the administration for GMO that anyone knows of?
Not that I'm aware of.
My concern is that there is a whole bunch of studies and evidence being provided by both sides of the issue, and my concern is that there's a lot of static going on, and I mean personally, for me, it's very difficult to really identify what exactly is the truth and what's propaganda from the companies or from either side of the issue. And I understand that there is, limited definitive data showing the effects of GMO, and that studies are still being conducted. So I was thinking that it might be good for in the best interest of the county to have some sort of group gather what data is out there and try and identify exactly what is known and what is unknown at this time in terms of health effects on the public.
Well, if I could just add to the discussion, I think putting all of that aside, the pros and cons of GMOs, if we look at this bill from a practical point of view, a logistic point of view with regard to the department, DEM, and given its current mandate for a bill like Bill 109 to be either effective or successful, it seems that the Department of Environmental Management, its current mandate, cannot fulfill what this bill is requiring of the department with regard to human resources and finances. And if the council or the island or those involved in the GMO discussion want the Department of Environmental Management to assess these issues and be involved in an enforcer for these types of issues, then, the mandate of the department, would need to be changed. But I think as it stands right now, it's not equipped to deal with a bill of this nature. And I think it would lead to frustration and an unsuccessful implementation of the bill.
I support that viewpoint. I think this is just outside of the Culiano of the department, outside of the expertise. This isn't an enforcement agency. I understand this is a problem because there is no Department of Ag in the county, but that doesn't mean that you play pin the tail on the donkey. It's really not appropriate for this department, and there's no other department in the county government which is so driven by meeting the requirements of regulations outside of its control, whether they're EPA, Department of Health. There's a struggle to do what's legally required of it. Another department may have the freedom to choose directions it goes in, and that's less the case with this one. But the GMO, whether you're for it or against it, is, I think, outside of the area of responsibility of this department and shouldn't be made a part of it.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
I personally have, a lot of concerns about GMO, and I agree with what Sherman and Ann both said, that I think this bill has a couple areas that I can't support. One being, I don't think it's appropriate for the Department of Environmental Management to be an enforcement agent, and I agree with the fact I don't think it's equipped or financed to do that. And one of the other items I didn't like in the bill is, well, two things actually. One being, if getting in the composting of GMO items, I'm not sure that is a correct approach to getting rid of GMO items, if that were deemed to be what would happen. Also, personally, even though I'm not for GMO, I have grave concerns about what it does to health of even from microorganisms in the ground to humans. I think that a lot more research needs to be done, and unbiased research, if that can be even done. And I also don't like the fact that the sunshine law, or sundown law, what is it? Sunshine, yeah, where it would go into effect after 30 months. There are several, sunset, excuse me, yeah, sunset law, after 30 months that would deprive some small businesses who have, over the years made a living or making a living, growing GMO, even though I personally don't, care for that. I would hate to see their livelihood, cut off by a bill of this determination. So for those reasons, I'm not in support of this, and I would personally vote to send the recommendation back with a negative recommendation for this bill.
I'm in agreement with that. And the agricultural industry here on Hawaii Island is such a rich history and is huge. However, one thing I would like to see council do is, and one thing I'm in favor for is labeling. I really think that labeling should be the first step for this issue, because the public should be aware of what they're purchasing, consuming, and frankly, if the GMO companies, as they claim, have nothing to hide, then I don't see what the problem would be in labeling products. But yeah, I also agree with Sherman and Ann that this department is looking at something that's really outside of its mission scope. But I'm in agreement to send back a negative recommendation.
Any other comments?
Was there anything in labeling in the bill itself? No, it's just about the
Enforcement.
The enforcement.
And disposal. of GMO crop waste, right?
Did you make a motion? No. Oh.
Not yet, we'll need a motion, I just wait if there's any
Okay.
other comments that people would like to make before we,
No, I think my opinion is we should just send a negative recommendation and put a recommendation. They should, instead of doing a ban on GMO, do a labeling for the GMO. That's our recommendation, instead of doing the total ban.
That's within
I don't
our,
think it's within our,
our duties.
It's
I
not in
think
our
it's-
duties.
It's just to comment on. that.
Comment
Oh,
on the
it's
bill,
just
on the bill as it
Just a comment
is,
on the bill.
as it stands,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We'll leave it to county council to amend or what have you, but.
Well, we'll just tell them our comment is to, maybe they should do labeling instead of ban.
Just for your information, I will be sending a separate letter that I'm putting together, which is essentially a negative recommendation on the bill. And nothing to do with the pros or cons of GMOs per se. It has to do with budget. That if you're going to do this, you have to have money for hearings officers. And that, some implementation issues, because I don't think you can implement until the administrative rules, just like we did the plastic bag ban. If you're going to do something like this, you have to have periods of time where you're going to set up implementation. And if we're going to have to be responsible for enforcement, you have to have time to adopt the rules before you can start implementing enforcement. My biggest concerns is that there's no standard for how a director determines that there's a violation. There's some issues over the fact that we don't have budgeting, because I'm assuming you can't find somebody in violation unless you have some proof of that violation. So I have some concerns about that. I have some concerns about the 30 months and the composting. Not because of the concerns over whether composting takes care of your GMO and puts it into something that's usable, but one, that we don't have a composting program right now. And two, that my understanding is that if I seize someone's crops, I have to pay them for the value of the crop that I'm seizing. And that's not addressed here either. There's no compensation to the farmers. And so, the pros and cons of GMO is beyond my review. My review is basically, are we the appropriate department? And if this is something that you're going to require the department to do, what's the funding, what's the process, and the fact that if I'm going to be required to do something, that where's the compensation if it's required. I think it's up to Corporation Counsel and possibly the AG's office as to whether the county has the authority to do that. My concern is the budget, the hearings officer, and the fact that when you do a Chapter 91 hearing, you have to take public testimony. Okay? Based on what I saw at the county council, if I am paying a hearings officer to conduct a hearing where 200 people are going to show up and testify, then $40,000 is not enough money, which I don't even have. I'm just basing this on what we paid out in the Huhonua contested case, which is around $40,000. And so I'm just saying that a contested case at GMO, I would expect to probably be much more costly, because you're paying a hearings officer and a court reporter during that process, because I don't envision the commission actually holding the Chapter 91 hearing. Because typically what like the Planning Commission does is, if it's something that's going to be relatively easy and not take up a whole lot of time, then the Planning Commission might hold the contested case hearing themselves rather than hire a hearings officer. If it's something that's complicated, may require evidence, may require lots of witnesses, and is also going to have lots of testimony, the Planning Commission typically hires a hearings officer, and you have to budget for what that would cost. And just based on what I saw at the council, I would assume that any such Chapter 91 GMO case would probably take a lot of time, and so you have to budget for that.
One correction, when a board or commission is performing an adjudicatory function, they're not covered under sunshine law, so they don't have to comply with sunshine law. The only reason we had to for Huanua and any other one under the planning commission, we had to take public testimony is because the planning commission rules require them to take public testimony before each hearing. But so it depends on the rules of the board or commission as to whether or not. But actually, there's case law that says that if they're performing their adjudicatory function, which that's what this would be under Chapter 91.
But you also have to allow people to intervene.
Yes,
And
that's where it
each
gets
intervener
because we had 21 interveners in
gets to say
Illinois
something.
to begin.
And so I'm just saying that I see this as becoming potentially very unwieldy,
Right.
potentially very complicated, potentially taking up a lot of time. And so I would envision that you need to hire a hearings officer. This bill actually says potentially having 3 hearings officers to conduct the hearing. And so I'm just saying that, if you're going to go down this path and say that my department is responsible for this, then you need to fund it. And you probably need to possibly not just fund a hearings officer, but you may need to create a position
Yes.
that is an inspector or an investigator in order to, because, I'm sorry, if somebody says, oh, they're growing, somebody files a complaint with us, which is typically how the planning department starts an investigation, somebody files a complaint. So somebody files a complaint with Department of Environmental Management and says, Mr. Smith is growing GMO corn. Well, I can go and I can look at the corn, but looking at corn, and I've looked at fields of corn on Kauai, it looked like corn. It looked like corn that I saw in the 1960s in Maryland. It looked like corn that I saw in the 1990s in Nebraska and Kansas, and that probably was GMO corn. But I'm just saying the corn I saw in the 1960s on the mainland looked just like the corn I saw growing later. And I'm assuming the stuff in the 1960s was not GMO, because I passed cornfields. So just, it doesn't fall into the usual type of investigation that the county would normally do, which is, hey, if somebody's got a house built too close to the road, we can measure that. If somebody is alleged to have a GMO, then other than sending them a letter and saying, hey, we think you're GMO, that's not proof, so you can't find them in violation. You would need the ability and the authority to go and take some of their crop on their private property. So I would need the authority to go on the private property, which typically my department would not have that authority. You have to give me the authority, you have to give my inspector the authority to go and seize material on private property in order to subject it to testing to determine, because in order for me to determine there's a violation, I need some proof. So the only way I would get that proof is genetic testing, so I need money for the testing. But I also need the authority to go on private property and seize part of the crop. And so those are some of the issues that I have that I'm going to try and address in my letter, because I just see that there are problems that I don't know that I have a mechanism
Or the
for actually
infrastructure.
doing what they're asking me to do, because if I don't have the authority to go on private property and seize their crop and subject it to testing, then I have no way of determining whether there is a violation. And that is, for me, you give me this, but if I have no mechanism to actually do what you're asking me to do, then it's almost not worth passing a bill. So you have to look at some of those issues. It's like, if you're going to have an enforcement, where's the authority? Do I have a right to go on private property? And ultimately, because what, I ask somebody and they say, no, I'm not. You know, so you have to have that mechanism where you have the authority to go and do that. And that requires basically giving me some police powers to go on. And I'm not sure that you can necessarily do that, because I think that may be an issue of state law, whether you can give somebody police powers. Police department has those police powers, but I don't know that, and that has not been
That's
asked
for criminal behavior.
or questioned, is does the council have the authority to give me the authority to go onto private property
And enforce.
and enforce it? And so those are some of the questions that I will be putting in my letter to the council.
It doesn't exist anywhere
And it,
in the
you know-
states.
Well, that's the biggest problem I saw with the bill was, number one, who determines whether it's GMO or not? There are no experts that I'm aware of within the county. So you'd have to go outside the county, you'd have to go to a laboratory or something, wherever they test those things. So there could be numerous problems just involved in that one aspect.
Well, so for me, the issue is, where's my authority?
Right.
So before I can find a violation, I need proof. Where's my authority to go and seize someone's crop and submit it to testing? Because in the planning department, we do a lot of voluntary stuff. We couldn't go on somebody's private property unless we had permission. And so we would do visual inspections for violation, and a lot of times people would allow us to come on their property, we would get permission. But you can't visually look at someone's property and determine whether it's GMO or not. And so I would need either the permission of the property owner, or I need something in the law that gives me the authority to go onto private property and seize a property. And that's the question I have, is I'm not sure what authority I have under this bill to even do what it's asking me.
Well, it doesn't really address that either.
That's part of it.
And I'm not sure there's anywhere in the states that's enforcing. Are you aware, Amy?
I think Department of Ag has certain authority given
In this
to
state?
in this state to investigate crops, seize crops. Because like they
Like
can go,
quarantine.
like banana
Quarantine.
bunchy top, they can go and do quarantine. So they've been given authority in certain circumstances to go onto private property and seize if they feel that it's a danger to other stuff. But I'm just saying, I look at this, because in order to implement, in order to make it work, you've got to spell out and give me authority to do that. And there has to be something in state law that gives the county council the right to give me that authority. And so those are the kinds of questions I'm going to raise. I don't know the answer, but I'm going to have a series of questions about the bill and implementation that I will submit to the council.
Okay, any other?
So in our recommendation is, I would like to focus on the logistics of the inability for DEM to, rather than, and making it clear it is not a statement about the pros and cons of GMO.
It's from a practical and logistic
Yeah,
standpoint.
because I personally am against it, but I see the problems with the enforcement.
Any other comments?
before we make a motion?
We need a motion to send a negative recommendation regarding Bill 101 to County Council. We have to show a meeting. Add on that, yes or no?
Well,
We need to go now, we need to.
Let me ask one question. Do we need to elaborate as to why we're sending back the negative? I think I would like to have us put something that would, give some
That's what I'm
reason
trying
why
to
we're.
say.
Exactly, so
that-
for the so the motion would be.
Yeah,
to-
and that it is not a reflection of a pro or con stance on the issue, GMO itself.
Are we agree with
For
that?
me, I feel it's important to make that distinction.
From practical and logistic.
Yeah, and that evaluation that DM would have a very difficult time with the enforcement.
Well, personally, I think we have another bill for the council that addresses it better. And I'm in support of that, but I would agree with you.
So I think the question is both whether this is the appropriate department.
Yeah,
I wonder if it would have been referred if this department were called the Department of Sanitation instead of
Right.
Environmental Management. And all of the questions that the director raises about the absence of
Well,
The authority.
there's some language in the bill that talks about the chief of police deputizing somebody, and then I designate, and then they deputize them as a special. I'm just not sure that that's entirely kosher.
Right, that's the penal enforcement,
Right.
section 14, item E.
is there a motion on the table right now?
No, they're trying.
We're trying to-
We want to get the wording.
Yeah, I think the wordsmithing
Yeah, so
of it.
whatever kind of negative or positive, whatever, I think you should provide in the motion an explanation for your recommendation.
Yeah, that's
whatever
what I
that is.
suggest.
Okay, so,
Do you want to go for it?
Okay, so the chair needs a motion from one of you guys.
we can take our time, you can start saying, a negative recommendation, and then we'll get the wording together.
Okay.
You don't have to state it all out right perfectly the first time.
I would say one reason is that this doesn't fall naturally within the
Mandate.
scope and duties of the Department of Environmental Management.
That's one, did you get that, Sharon?
Yes.
Oh, well, I guess maybe a preference that the commissioners are recommending a negative, negative recommendation, but it is not
I would say from a practical and logistical standpoint.
yeah, and not on a pro and con for, I don't,
Right.
yeah, pro and con about GMO itself, or something like that. And then what Sharon suggested.
Do you want to repeat what you suggested? For Sharon.
It doesn't fall naturally.
I would agree
The
that
scope
it's
and duties
not
of the
based on the
department.
merits of
Is what
GMO.
you said.
The merits-
Yeah, okay, that's nice, okay.
Sharon, repeat what you said?
Yeah.
What Sherm said was it doesn't fall naturally in the scope and duties of the department. What Trina said was we're providing a negative recommendation with the help of Ed from a practical and logistical standpoint.
And then what did Sherman said, which does not,
Fall naturally
Yeah.
under the scope of
That's
Okay.
duties.
Right.
Yeah, when we had that on.
Sure.
So moved.
Well, who made
Are
the,
you-
is Trina?
Are you making the motion, Trina?
okay, I'll make the patchwork motion.
So,
Do we
let me
want
get
to
out
add a
of
second reason, which was the absence of clear authority or procedures
Of enforcement?
Yeah.
of enforcement?
Yes, we do.
And then we'll have her read it back
Yes.
before you guys.
Yeah.
And it's not a negative endorsement of GNO or positive, I guess, positive or negative.
Right, that's in there too.
Yeah, okay. So maybe we'll get the final wording.
Okay.
Okay. Now, a lot of it is just saying the same thing in different words.
Right.
So we need to know what. I mean,
Well, you want to
not being pro and con of GMOs is the same thing as a negative recommendation from a
Right,
practical
right.
and logistical standpoint. Which one do you want to say?
Yeah, you guys
First
decide.
one.
Logistical standpoint?
Yeah.
Yeah, so why don't you, why don't you read back what you
Yeah,
have?
what you have.
Okay. Not in the order that you guys have asked. The commission is giving a negative recommendation from a practical and logistical standpoint of the bill. It doesn't fall naturally into the scope and duties of the department, and there's an absence of clear authority. Somebody said something after authority.
With regard to enforcement.
Okay.
Enforcement.
Okay, clear enforcement authority.
Yeah.
Is that part of what I'm saying?
But how did you add that, about, but it is not
But that's
Not on the
already-
merits of GMOs that we.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
already stated.
It's already-
Well, I don't think,
Because you
you're
have to look,
saying it's
but you have to look at the
logistical.
bill, because the
Right.
bill
I
really
still-
deals with enforcement and penal. It
Right.
doesn't really say GMOs are good, GMOs are bad. It's looking
Yeah.
at,
But
how.
that, yeah, that's not the scope, is it, of the department? To say, to give a
No,
recommendation
the only
on
scope for the
GMO.
department in the bill is enforcement only.
Oh, it's only enforcement.
Yeah,
So
that's
we
the
don't
only
need to
thing.
say that, Trina.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, BJ? That's the only thing the bill, that's the only part that the department plays in the bill is the enforcement part of it.
Yeah.
It's the only
Oh,
time you
okay.
guys are.
Beyond, it's almost accepting that GMOs is already.
What's unclear is who's responsible for, well, we're supposed to do the registration too.
Right. And collecting the fees for that as well. The $100 fee to
And
register.
also, they don't say what happens to the fee.
Let's pay the
There were some
hearing
unknowns.
officer.
There were some unknowns.
Yeah, okay, so we're still not there, guys.
I think, if you read it back one more time, I think we're fine with what you have.
Okay.
Please.
The commission is providing a negative recommendation from a practical and logistical standpoint. It doesn't fall naturally, or this bill doesn't fall naturally in the scope and duties of the department, and there's an absence of clear enforcement authority.
Second.
That
So
sounds
we have
good.
a motion, right?
We do?
Okay, so
Well,
second.
you're still trying to create the motion.
Okay,
That's
Trina
it.
said she was the author of the motion.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so does everybody agree with that motion? No?
Read it one more time, please.
Okay,
Let's
this
go.
bill doesn't fall, oh, I'm sorry. The commission, I'm reading out of order. The commission is providing a negative recommendation from a practical and logistical standpoint. This bill doesn't fall naturally in the scope and duties of the Department of Environmental Management, and there is an absence of clear enforcement authority.
I wanted to say something about adequate resources, or do you feel that's not unnecessary?
I think that sort of falls under practical and
Yeah,
logistical
yeah,
um,
covered
standpoint,
under that.
personally.
Okay,
So we vote on it?
sounds good to me.
Very good, Sean. Is that the last part?
Would it be worth adding, I mean, a budgetary, practical budgetary, or
Oh, you said
Practical and
something about-
logistical standpoint with regard to budget and human
And
resources.
staffing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we need it read one more time?
Well, yes, please.
Okay, I need to clarification
Yes.
on the second. We're saying it doesn't fall naturally in the scope of the duties of the department. It meaning the bill?
Yeah.
The bill.
Bill 109.
Okay.
Yes.
The commission, I've already lost it.
We'll help you, Sharon.
Okay,
We'll get back
thank
to you.
you.
Don't worry.
The commission is submitting a negative recommendation from a practical and logical standpoint in regards to budget and staffing. The bill doesn't fall naturally in the scope and duties of the Department of Environmental Management. There is an absence of clear enforcement authority.
Description. What's that last part?
There is an absence of clear enforcement authority.
Say as drafted?
I would say as drafted. I mean, the bill seems
Is there-
clear that
okay.
the department's going to be enforcement, but the logistics of that are unclear as to how that would actually be
Absence
determined.
of, okay, Jim.
Clear, what was the term?
Is there a consensus among the board members whether we're in favorable of a bill?
That's not.
Okay, I mean, I'm just asking this out because, like, Trina has said she is against, I'm, not comfortable with the GMO, products. I'd like, if the majority of the commission feels, is there some way we could put some sort of words in that would, that we're not opposed to this, we're not opposed to GMO control, but we're opposed to this bill for the reasons we're stating.
That's assuming everyone is,
That's what I'm saying, that's what I'm asking, if there's a consensus.
I don't think it's relevant.
I don't think it's relevant either.
I would-
sorry?
I wouldn't go there.
I don't think it's relevant to this particular bill.
Okay.
This bill has already basically stated here that it's an anti-GMO bill, and this is how they deem that they will enforce that bill.
Right,
So,
and
I mean,
we're-
the decision's already been made, so I don't think it's for us to make a decision on whether pro or con.
No,
That's
I'm
why
just
going
saying,
beyond it.
we're doing a negative recommendation to the bill.
Correct.
That,
It's not
that
your
could
personal
mean-
opinion.
Yeah.
It's not
I was
reflective of
wanting to
personal opinions.
Explain why we're doing the negative recommendation.
I think in the wording that's stated, Tom, I feel comfortable that, it doesn't reflect personal opinion.
Okay, then one final reading, please, to see what our final words are.
The commission is providing a negative recommendation from a practical and
I'm fine with that.
I'm okay.
I'm good?
I'm good.
okay, Trina made the motion, John seconded it a while ago. There's your second threshold.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion approved. Okay, good job, everyone. Thank you, Sharon, for all the...
Thanks for your perseverance, Sharon.
Okay, next item, selection of 2014 officers. So, as you know, we currently have 6 commissioners. And moving into 2014, we have 6. And so, my term as chair ends actually with the next meeting. And so and in fact, the reason we don't have a vice chair at the moment is we were thinking we would have the 9 commissioners. Anyway, we're still with the 6 commissioners, so here we are, and we're going to determine who will be vice chair. And as it stands right now, vice chair moves to become chair next year. So,
Can you be reelected?
I don't know if we have any rules.
The commission rules say that you have a chair and a vice chair, and the vice chair automatically takes the chair's position the next year. But
And
we
that's
don't
all it
have a
says.
vice
Yeah,
chair.
so in the absence of a vice chair, is there any council?
Is there any conflict? Is that-
Council, I was wondering if
Okay.
there's...
I think they're gonna have to elect a new chair,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Just goes straight to a chair.
elect a new chair,
Just goes straight to a chair.
have to go through nominating a chair and voting on it.
Well,
Well,
I
move
moved to what?
to elect Ann as chair.
I think she's doing a good job.
Yes.
The rules don't say you can't have the same chair. It just says that the vice president, the vice chair.
Well, if you have a vice president,
I mean,
the
vice
chair
chair.
couldn't,
Well,
if we had a
don't
vice
have
chair,
Right,
it would be
she
an
could.
automatic chair.
one. Right.
If you couldn't have the chair.
Why don't you have a vice chair?
Because Ann wanted to wait until we had more members.
Right, well, we thought that was coming last January, but it's not.
Oh.
Right. So, and then we had the two commissioners leaving, stay on for an extra 3 months. So we thought within that time we'd be fine, but anyway, that's not what happened, so. So
we
that's why we don't have a
you
vice
need to
chair.
elect a chair and a vice chair for 2014.
Yeah. You
Well-
should have both regardless of the membership.
Right. So, if there are others who would like to be chair, please state so. If not, I mean, I can continue for another year.
I nominate Ann.
I did already.
Oh, second.
Okay. We need a vice chair.
Well, hang on.
Oh,
Okay,
I'm
so
sorry.
Trina made the motion to nominate, or did she just nominate? Do you need
Need
a
a
motion, or
motion.
can you just nominate?
Well, you need a motion, well, you need to nominate,
And then, okay.
And then the motion to approve the nomination, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, so Trina
Made a motion.
nominated
To nominate.
Ann Lee
I'll
as
second.
2014 chair.
Did somebody second?
I did.
Deal second.
Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, aye. All opposed? Motion approved. Vice chair. We'll need a vice chair.
I'd like to nominate John.
Need a motion?
Second.
We need a motion.
No, we didn't make a motion on yours. We just nominated and then
Voted.
voted.
You don't need a second.
What's the procedure?
I don't know.
I thought it was mine.
Well, at least let's do it the same on both.
You should do the same way on both.
Previously, we had a nomination committee and they brought forth their recommendation. And then the people, and then the commission voted to accept their recommendation. But this is different, so I don't know.
Well, I thought Trina nominated and then moved to,
Right.
Second.
yeah, and then I seconded.
So let's do it.
Yeah,
Let's
let's
do
just do it
the
the same
nominations
way.
as
Just-
motions.
Just do it, just in case, just do a motion.
Made a motion
So Ann.
to nominate Ann Lee as 2014 chair. John seconded it.
And we voted.
Okay. So Randall made a motion to nominate John
I second.
Deal
As vice.
as vice chair. And Trina seconded.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. How about you, John?
Thank you, John.
All opposed? All opposed? All opposed? Motion approved.
All right.
Right.
There you go, John.
We're legit.
Legit. And as it moves, so that you're clear, John, the vice chair becomes chair, so 20
Yeah.
your
Oh,
chair.
yeah.
Unless you got.
Does your term last this
Yeah.
long?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, good, good.
I just
Unless we determine
You
otherwise.
can always
You can always-
revisit that.
Exactly.
That was just made a few years ago.
Oh, it's a good rule.
All right.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Future agenda items. Sewer connection waiver exemption policy update to include expected date of implementation. So that's still on our future scope. And our next meeting is November 27th in Kona. December, there is no meeting, so we have one more meeting for 2013.
Are there any other future agenda items for next time?
And other, are there any other
Actually-
bills that can be coming? Sorry, go ahead.
I'd like to know about how Maui is doing on their
So we need a
Waste
Maui
fuel.
waste.
Do we have to put it on the agenda, or
Update?
can
Yeah,
Bobby
that'd be
update us on that?
Well, we could make the specific agenda item.
Okay, but who's going to follow through with getting the update?
Bobby,
Okay.
yeah.
Bobby, you,
Sorry?
I know to be a
Can you repeat, Tom,
We're
was it
excited.
there?
They're asking that there be an update on Maui waste reduction technology project for next meeting, and they wanted you to get that information.
There's not a whole lot. I mean, they awarded a contract, but there's no movement.
Oh,
Because
there's nothing happening?
Nothing's, well,
Oh,
it's
can we
all contingent on Maui Electric. So you can't move forward until there's a contract with somebody who's going to burn your RDF. And right now, they don't have the follow-up contracts in place, and part of that is because the person that they thought they were going to sell the RDF to their 10-year contract with MECO expires and they haven't renewed it, so there's no movement really. But I can check with Kyle and see if anything's happened.
Be pretty easy.
Yeah, it would be easy update.
But I think you're right.
I can
Better
call
than-
I can discuss any other future agenda items. If not, Sharon, I can,
I have
oh, go ahead.
a question. Can we get an update, which perhaps needs to be an executive session on the fuel theft? What happened?
They got charged criminally. That's it, and then we've put, procedures in place to make sure that it doesn't happen again. There isn't really an update. I mean, they pled guilty, I think.
Any other suggestions for future agenda items? And well, with that, we can adjourn. Motion?
Second.
Any discussion?
Who was the second?
Okay.
Yeah, Tom.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion, oh, John is, we're here, we have five.
Probably good.
Okay, motion approved. Absent chair. Well, thank you, everyone.